My name is Molly Mazenko, and this is my project, Anorexia Nervosa, the eating disorder and associated energy balance issues. Let's get started. What exactly is anorexia nervosa? It's an eating disorder characterized by intentionally limiting the intake of food or beverages due to a strong drive for thinness and an intense fear of gaining weight. There are two subgroups. The restrictive type limits how much food they eat and often overexercises, while the binge-purge subgroup overeats in a short time period and follows by inducing vomiting or diarrhea, overexercising, restricting, or some combination of those behaviors. Both groups have the same goal of reducing caloric intake and are fixated on body image. A typical person is profiled as an adolescent to young adult female who is perfectionistic, hardworking, introverted, resistant to change, and highly self-critical. They also tend to have low self-esteem based on body image distortion and avoid risky or potentially harmful behaviors or situations. Despite the typical profile, this disorder does not discriminate and can affect people of all sexes, ages, ethnicities, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Contrary to what most people think, a person struggling with anorexia does not need to look extremely thin. It's not always obvious, and you can't always point out whether a person is anorexic or not. For reference, this is the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria that psychiatrists use to diagnose anorexia nervosa. I wanted to share some common warning signs because picking up on these things early on can save a struggling person's life. So these are some physical things that you may notice or things you may hear someone struggling say. Anorexia has different impacts on various body systems. In the cardiovascular system, it's common for patients to have a decreased resting metabolic rate and electrolyte imbalances. With less food intake, the body begins to break down and consume its own tissues. The first organs that are broken down tend to be muscles, including the heart. When heart muscles are weakened, pulse and blood pressure drop, causing an increase in the risk of having heart failure. Food restriction can also lead to abnormal stomach emptying and nutrient digestion. The brain consumes about 1/5 of the body's caloric intake, so when that's restricted, the brain does not get the energy it needs to function properly. This may cause things such as brain fog, difficulty concentrating, and obsessive thoughts. Feeling of extreme hunger or obsessive thoughts can keep patients awake at night, and some experience sleep apnea. Numbness or tingling in extremities may onset from a lack of fat intake, as neurons require a protective layer in order to conduct electricity. In the endocrine system, sex and thyroid hormone levels drop, which can cause amenorrhea in women and bone loss. There is also a decrease in the core body temperature. These are more symptoms, most of which are physical things you may notice about someone with anorexia or they may notice about themselves. I also included a list of other disorders that are common in individuals with anorexia. Studies in families and twins point to anorexia being familial and influenced by other genetic factors. Overall, genetic factors play up to 50 to 70% of the role in the development. Additionally, children of parents with psychological disorders or disturbances are at an increased risk of developing anorexia. Mother's attitudes towards food, weight, and exercise were found to influence her daughter's attitudes. Studies show that children of mothers with eating disorders were found to develop disturbed attitudes and eating habits and may be at higher risk of developing the eating disorder psychopathology. Other environmental factors, such as how our society promotes the ideal body and thinness as a beauty standard, also play a role in the development of anorexia. Society dictating the worth of a person based on looks only perpetuates disordered eating habits. Comments made about food or body image, whether positive or negative, intentional or unintentional, can affect how a person struggling with anorexia perceives themselves. Typically, we only think of comments like, "Did you gain weight?" or "Don't eat that, it's unhealthy," have a negative impact. While those types of phrases are harmful, other things that unaffected people may take as compliments can be triggering to those who are affected. Phrases like, "You look so good since you've lost weight," can set off a person with anorexia as it encourages the behavior, strengthens the desire to be thin, and reinforces the idea that worth is based on looks. Some things such as trauma, co-occurring disorders, family history of eating disorders, and emotional or personality traits can leave an individual predisposed to developing anorexia. Anorexia has the highest mortality rate of any psychological disorder. Within 10 years of onset, 6 to 10% of anorexics die, and within 20 years it jumps to 18 to 20%. The self-reported full recovery rate is only at 50%, while the partial recovery rate is at 20%. While the physical effects and repercussions of anorexia alone make the death rate so high, they're not the only cause. 1 in 5 anorexia deaths is by suicide, and they're often done through intense and highly lethal methods. Anorexia does not only manifest physically but mentally too, affecting the individual's state of mind. Many people with anorexia experience other psychological disorders, like mood and anxiety disorders. Finally, we see that there's a higher lifetime prevalence for anorexia in adolescents than in adults, but in both age categories, it's 2 to 3 times more common in females than males. Let's look at some existing solutions and treatments for anorexia. One of the most common forms of treatment is therapy, and there's a wide array of options. It provides a safe environment for patients to express themselves and reflect upon their experiences in life and in dealing with the disorder. They have an opportunity to gain better understanding of what they're going through and use the gained knowledge to develop a better body image, self-esteem, and relationship with food. The biggest weakness is that it's difficult to scientifically study and prove the effectiveness, as there are often high dropout rates in studies. It also may take some trial and error for people to find the therapy that works best for them. It does not directly impact energy, so there's no way to return to a normal energy level. Though by developing a better relationship with the body, food, and exercise through therapy, it can eventually lead to physical recovery and thus a return to normal energy levels. There's no medication that specifically treats or cures anorexia, but some doctors may prescribe their patients antidepressants or antipsychotics for comorbid disorders. The main weakness of medication as a means to treat anorexia is that there's a severe lack of research and evidence to show that it's actually an effective method. That being said, I wanted to include some potential strengths. Just keep in mind that while these were studied, they were not studied enough and are not proven to treat anorexia directly. One study showed that antidepressants may aid in weight gain. Another showed that antidepressants with psychotherapy may help with depression or obsessive thoughts after weight gain, and a final study showed that antipsychotics may start weight gain and control anxiety and depression. Many of the medications given to anorexia patients are proven to be useful in treating depression and anxiety, and while they may help with that aspect, it does not diminish the strong desire to lose weight. There's much more research to be done before any of these potential benefits can be confirmed. There are many different hospitalization, residential, and inpatient treatment options available for patients depending on their medical and psychiatric stability. When a patient is having severe life-threatening health complications, hospitalization aims to stabilize the symptoms. All of these kinds of treatments aim to establish a healthier relationship with food and have a goal of replenishing the body's nutrients and reintroducing food to the body, orally or through a feeding tube. Consistently feeding the body will increase the energy levels of the patient. One major drawback and risk of hospitalization specifically is the potential for the patient to experience refeeding syndrome. This can occur 2 to 5 days after the refeeding process begins, and it happens because the body is unable to properly restart the metabolism process. It has the potential to become deadly, so professionals taking care of recovering patients must manage the treatment process and follow the current standards carefully. So while hospitalization, residential, and inpatient treatment are a very effective treatment method, it's important to not overlook the risks. Let's look at a newer treatment method called Neurofeedback. Recently, there's been a focus on the neurobiological changes in patients, which is seen in abnormal EEG patterns and can show evidence of CNS dysfunction. EEGs show theta, alpha, and beta wave bands. Compared to healthy individuals, anorexia patients showed reduced alpha power and elevated theta and beta power. These changes are linked to anxiety and depression. The alpha and beta waves returned to normal after recovery, but the elevated theta waves remain the same. This is considered a trademark of anorexia as it scars the brain. This image shows the process of neurofeedback, which uses real-time displays of brain activity from EEGs to give the patient a more active role in therapy by regulating their brain function. Neurofeedback facilitates the altering of dysfunctional thoughts and behaviors by having the patient self-regulate their neurophysiological activity through real-time displays of their brain activity. The positive reinforcement provided encourages self-efficacy, regaining control, and restarting the learning process. The parts of anorexia related to emotional stress can be mediated as the changes in brain patterns lower psychological symptoms such as emotional stress and anxiety. This treatment method has already been successfully used as treatment for substance use disorder, which is common comorbidity. This method also has weaknesses. The study has yet to be retested or replicated. Additionally, the sample size wasn't very representative. It only included females, but there should be a more diverse representation as anyone can be affected. The age range used was 12 to 18. People of all ages can suffer, so they should be included in the study. The major issue with the age of the participants is the neurodevelopment of a 12-year-old is much different than that of an 18-year-old. This has potential to influence results and could be why scientists kept the age range relatively small. A possible solution if the study were to be redone is to make several groups with smaller age ranges in them, so the neurodevelopment may have less of an impact on results and so more ages can be included. Finally, the sample size was very small, including only 22 participants. In order for the study to be generalizable to the whole population, the sample size would need to be much larger. While this treatment method does not have a direct impact on energy balance, developing a healthier state of mind and treating the mental aspect of the disorder may facilitate physical recovery and the regaining of proper energy balance. Now I'll move on to an interview I did with a family friend who had anorexia. I included her full responses in the description box if you're interested. The first question was, how long have you had anorexia, and if comfortable, can you describe the extent of it? My friend had been self-conscious for as long as she could remember, but didn't always act on her thoughts. She developed anorexia around the beginning of high school, and the desire to be thin became extreme and caused a lot of mental and physical damage. She calorie counted, severely restricted food intake, wanted to remain underweight by BMI standards, exercised twice a day, and much more. It lasted a few years until the end of high school. She doesn't believe she has an eating disorder anymore, and while she still struggles with body image issues sometimes, she believes she has better self-control and knows to not treat herself how she used to. The second question was, what kind of treatments did you try, and what did you find worked for you? My friend said that she never received professional treatment for her eating disorder because no one ever told her she had a problem, and she was so deep in the disorder that she saw nothing wrong with it. Her mom was hospitalized the summer before her senior year, and she ate comfort food given to her, stopped exercising, and got back to a healthier weight. This past September, she decided to start therapy where she got to talk through her history. She found therapy to be extremely helpful and learned to forgive herself for all the harm she did to her body. She says one of the biggest takeaways from therapy is that recovery isn't linear, but it's worth it. Next, I asked, how do you think the outlook for people recovering from eating disorders can be improved? Raising awareness was the biggest thing mentioned. She described that people with eating disorders often have a lot of issues recognizing the severity of their struggle and don't feel that it warrants getting help. Because these things are so stigmatized in our society, she believes that raising awareness and destigmatizing them could take away the shame or fear these people feel and could increase the chances of them reaching out for help. The next question was, how is your energy impacted throughout your eating disorder? My friend recalled how she over-exercised but never remembers her energy levels being low. She actually felt worse on the days she didn't work out. She did feel a lot of mental effects as she was mentally exhausted, experienced brain fog, and began suffering from other mental health issues. The last question was, what happened to your energy throughout recovery? She said that she had even less energy during recovery than during the thick of her disorder, and even ended up becoming anemic. She now has to take iron pills, and if she doesn't, she notices a significant drop in her energy levels and feels weaker. This topic is very important to me because of my family friend, and is why I chose to research it for my project. Throughout this video, you could have recognized a plethora of things that cause or are a result of decreased energy balance in anorexia nervosa. It's no secret that restricting food intake and overexercising negatively impact energy balance. When the body is constantly in survival mode, which in this case is onset by starvation, non-essential processes cease and the body operates on limited resources. The body is not designed to live in these conditions for long, which is why the disorder is very harmful. While it's a prevalent and deadly disorder, it's incredibly understudied and there's not as much awareness as there should be. I hope this topic begins to get the attention it needs and that scientists begin to understand the root causes, impacts, and treatments better.